Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Lamed Hey, Amud Beis, starting with Lamed Hey, Amud Aleph, the very last line on the Amud. The Mishnah had taught us for an Eruv to be effective, it must be in existence at the time of the Bein Hashmoshos for the Knisas HaShabbos. And therefore, if an Eruv were to roll outside of the Techum during the Bein Hashmoshos, is not going to be effective. Similarly, if the Eruv is buried underneath a Gal Shel Avonim, and you would have to dig and do a Malacha Di Araisa in order to then get out that Eruv, it's inaccessible and therefore it's not going to be a valid Eruv. The Mishnah had brought another two cases. One case being if it was Nisraf, if the Eruv becomes consumed by a fire, it also will not be effective. And finally, the Mishnah brings a fourth case, that if the Eruv becomes, it's Truma that becomes Nitmes, it's no longer even edible by a Kohen, it also is going to be invalid. The Gemara asks, why do we need these two cases? Lamali. Tana Nisraf, the Gemara explains, Lo diacha koicho de Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi's shita in the Mishnah is if it's a suffix, whether in this case, the Eruv became Nisraf mi ba'oid yoim, or if it became Nisraf after Tzeis HaKoichavim, it's a suffix. Rabbi Yosi goes lekula, and he says it's going to be valid as a kosher Eruv. So to show the koyach of Rabbi Yosi, even though the Eruv does not exist, it's not even this world, still, we go lekula according to Rabbi Yosi, even the case of Nisraf. Tana Truma v'nitmeis lo dicha koicha de Rabbi Meir. Then we learn the fourth case as being Truma that became Tomei. That's going to the Shita, to show the strength of the Shita of Rabbi Meir, who's Machmir. Even though over here we're talking about Truma which does exist, only is Nitmeis, and it's Safek, whether it was Nitmeis mi ba'oid yoim or it's Nitmeis after Tzeis HaKochavim, still we'll go l'chumra. And we won't go after the chazaka that the truma was tahara beforehand. That's the sheet of Rabbi Meir. Ask the Gemara, Rabbi Meir sveike l'chumra. Does Rabbi Meir indeed hold that we go l'chumra when it comes to a safek? V'hatnan. It states in the following Mishnah, Tomei sheyara litbol. Somebody who is tomei, and he's now going to then be toivel in a mikvah. Safek toval, safek lo toval. It's unclear, it's a safek whether he actually was toivel completely, immersing himself completely in the mikvah, or there was a chatzitza. Va'afilu toval, safek toval ba'arboim so, safek lo toval ba'arboim so. Even in the event that he immersed himself completely in the mikvah, but it's a safek whether that mikvah had arboim so and was kosher or not. V'chein shnei mikvois ba'achas yesh ba'arboim so u'ba'achas ein bo arboim so v'tochas ba'achas mehen ve'ein yodeh be'ezem ein toval. Or a third scenario where he for sure was toivil completely without any chatzitzos. He also was toivil in a mikvah that was arboim so, but there was two mikvois. One was kosher with arboim so and the other one was not. Which one was he toivil in that was kosher or not? Sveikoi Tomei. The din is that misafek he is Tomei. The Mishnah goes on to say, when is this true that we say Sveikoi Tomei? That we say that the person goes after, we say the Chazaka de Mikara, since he was Tomei beforehand, we assume then that the tefillah was no good. We go after that Chazaka that was a state of Tuma beforehand, and we say he was not Tahar, Nitar, Betmura, Betuma ha Chamura. But this is all talking about when it's a Tuma Chamura di Araisa. Then we say you go after the Chazaka that he was Tameh beforehand, and therefore the Tefillah was not a good Tefillah. Aval Tuma Kala, but if it's a Tuma di Rabbanon, the Gemara now brings examples. The Mishnah brings an example. V'havei, v'haba roisha v'ruba mayim shuvin, where a person, the first example is sha'ochat choichlim tmein v'shasa mashkin tmein, where he eats tuma tmein. We saw this in Daf Chav Tes Amud Aleph. They brought a Mishnah over there that stated that if a person who eats chatzi pras of oicha that's tamei, he is poisel truma and he cannot eat truma. He's posel. midrabanan. V'haba roisha v'ruboy b'mayim she'uvin, a person who already was toivil in a proper mikvah, but then he showered in mayim she'uvin roisha v'ruboy, that's tamei derabanan. Or shenaflu al roisha v'al ruboy shlosha lugi mayim she'uvin v'yar litbol. Or even somebody who was tahar, and he had mayim she'uvin that was shlosha lugin that fell on him. That also is a status of Tumah D'Rabbanan. Safek Tovel, Safek Loy Toval. In the case where we're not sure whether he was immersing himself completely in the mikveh subsequently. V'afilu Tovel, even if he did immerse himself, but Safek Tovel Ba'ar Boim Saw, Safek Loy Tovel Ba'ar Boim Saw. We don't know whether he was Tovel in a kosher mikveh. V'chein shnei mikvois, v'achas yesh bo arboim so, v'achas ein bo arboim so, v'tovel ba'achas mehem, v'yinodeh be'ezem hen tovel. Or he was tovel completely in a mikvah, and he was completely tovel in one of two mikvois, but we don't know which one was kosher that he was tovel in. Sveikoi tohor. Here the Tana Kama, which is an unnamed Tana, which is really Rabbi Meir, says that Sveiko is tohor. Rabbi Yosi mitame. Rabbi Yosi is mitame. So here we have now a contradiction, because in our Mishnah, in regards to Eruv, Rabbi Meir states that Eruv, we go l'chumra, and we say that when the truma is nitmes, we go l'chumra, and we say that suffix is tameh. Yet over here, when it states that there's a derabanan dika suffix, we say, according to Rabbi Meir, which is again the not unnamed Tana, Sveike Tar. So we have a contradiction within Rabbi Meir. The truth is, we also have a contradiction with Rabbi Yosi, because Rabbi Yosi in our Mishnah states, you go lekula. And yet, at the end of this Mishnah that we just quoted, it states that Rabbi Yosi is metame. The Gemara will ask that question on the top of the next Amud, the steer within Rabbi Yosi. But right now, we want to focus on the contradiction within Rabbi Meir. Answers the Gemara, Kisover Rabbi Meir Tchumin the Araisa Ninhu. The Gemara answers that Rabbi Meir is of the Shita that Eruv is the Araisa. And therefore, when it comes to a Safek the Araisa, in this case, the Truma was Nitmes, we go L'chumra according to Rabbi Meir. But when it comes to somebody who was Toivel Midirabanan, therefore, Rabbi Meir says he's Nitar. Misafek, we say, he goes and says Tohor. So it's not a contradiction. But ask the Gemara, is it so that Rabbi Meir holds that Tchumin is the Araisa? V'so Rabbi Meir Tchumin the Araisa? V'hotnan im ein yachol lahavliyoi. Here, their Mishnah states, in regards to Eruvin, that we measure the 2,000 amos. Normally we measure it with a 50 amma rope, where one is holding on one end, the other is holding on to the other end, and we measure the 2,000 amos using the 50 amma rope. But when there is going to be spaces in between, let's say you have in between two mounds, you have, let's say, a valley. So we'll measure that by one standing on top and the other standing on the other side on top, and we'll measure across. In other words, we won't then take into account the dip. And similarly, when it comes to, let's say, a hill, we won't go ahead and consider the slope. We'll go and say that we can take the both ends and measure across, even though you're going to then mean saving some of the space. We'll go lekula. So when is that so? Im ein yachol lahavliyoi. But if you can't do that because you have too wide of a gap, let's say on a hill, so then bezu omar Rabbi Dostoi bar Yonai mishum Rabbi Meir shomati shemekadrim baharim. He states the name of Rabbi Meir. Then in such a situation we'll be mekil, and we'll say that you can't do that by not being able to then take the 15 amma rope. We'll then say what you should do is then have one person stand, let's say, on the bottom, and then hold a rope of Daled Amos. He'll hold that on his chest, connected his chest. Then the one who goes above him on the slope of, let's say, the mound, he will then hold it by his foot. So therefore, we'll be makil when it comes to then measuring the 2,000 amos. Here we will not take into account that area that's sloped. So over here, midi rabbanan, we say you can do that. And therefore you'll be saving space that is going to be a half of a person's koima, because from the foot until the chest, that's not going to be measured. And therefore we'll still then use that as our measuring for the 2,000 amos. But this is only midirabbanan. V'ho Omar of Nachman Rabba Bar Avua ein mekadrin loy be'orei miklat ve'orei ve'loy be'egle arufa sheminei shehein shel Torah. When it comes to Torah measurements, we don't do this. And therefore, over here, when it comes to Ir Miklat is when somebody who kills B'shoigeg, he goes to Ir Miklat, a city of refuge, where he gets then refuge from the Goel Hadam. He's still enabled to get refuge from the Goel Hadam up until the Tchum. So we measure that Tchum with a straight path, not what we call Mikadrin, piercing, and making a smaller measurement, because it's Deraisa. Similarly, when it comes to Egla Arufa, if a dead body was found in between two cities, and we don't know who the Rotzeach was, so we measure the closest to the closest city, and the Ziknei Ha'ir then declare that they then are going to capitate the Egel, what's called the Egel Arufa by the Nachal, and they're going to declare that the blood that was taken from this person is not on their hands. How do we measure that to the closest city? We measure straight. We don't do piercing. We don't do mekadrin. And yet it says over here, in the name of Rabbi Meir, that when it comes to the Eruv, we're mekadrin. How could that be? If Eruv is the Araisa, we wouldn't mekadrin. Answers the Gemara, Lokasha hadidei hadarabbe. Really, Rabbi Meir is of the Shita that we don't mekadrin. In fact, it's the Araisa, and therefore you have to measure straight. But his Rabbeim, they hold that Tchumin is D'Rabbanan. Dekanami, the Gemara says, we can medayik this from our Mishnah. Diktoni bezu, from the Mishnah we quoted, bezu Omar Rabbi Distoi, Bar Yonai, Mishum Rabbi Meir, Shomati shemekadrin behorim. It states that Rabbi Distoi, in the name Rabbi Meir, states that I heard that you can go ahead and mekadrim, piercing behorim. And there, he's saying, I heard, meaning to say, I heard in the name of my Rabbeim that they can do this type of measurement, the kula. But I don't hold that way. And therefore, Shema Mina, because Rabbi Meir holds that Tchumin is the Araisa. Now we have resolved Rabbi Meir with our Mishnah, because we said that Rabbi Meir in our Mishnah is talking about Tchumin, which is the Araisa. And we asked from a statement that was in regards to Toivel, Tevila, that was a Tuma D'Rabbanan. And we said that initially we thought that in case of our Tchumin it was D'Rabbanan, and we answered the steer by saying Tchumin is D'Araisa. But now ask the Gemara, but Rami D'Araisa Rabbi Meir. Granted that Rabbi Meir holds that Tchumin is D'Araisa, and therefore we go L'chumra, but we can show you another place which is D'Araisa, and he goes L'kula Misveika. Says the Gemara, Disnan, Noga be'echad b'laylo, ve'eno yodeh im chayim meis. A person touched somebody, he touched his body, and he doesn't know when he touched him whether he was dead or alive. Ulamachar hishkim v'nimtza meis. The next morning, he determines that the person that he touched is dead. Now, it's not clear when did he die. Was it before he touched him or after? And there's a nafka mina of tumas meis, which is d'Araisa. Rabbi Meir mitaher. Rabbi Meir says that he is tahor. That means misveika we go lekula and we say that he's tahor. V'chacham mitamim shekol hatmeyas mishas mitziyasim. Whereas the chachamim say that he is tamei, because we say that kol hatmeyos are b'shas mitziyasim, the time that you found. And it comes out, therefore, we have a steer within Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, again, in our Mishnah states, when it comes to a Sveika D'Araisa, we go L'chumra, which our Mishnah is talking about Tchum, and he holds Tchum as D'Araisa. But over here, which is also D'Araisa, and it's a Safek, he goes L'kula, and he says Tohor. Answers the Gemara, Omar Rabbi Yirmiyahu, Mishnaseinu shahaya aleh sheretz kol ben hashmoshes. We're talking about in our Mishnah of Truma, when it becomes Nitma, when the sheretz was on the Truma, the entire ben hashmoshes. And that's why Rabbi Meir is machmir. Ask the Gemara the obvious question: Ihochi behalema Rabbi Yosi Safek Eruv kosher? Is there room for a machlokes? If this indeed is the case, that there is a sheretz on the truma, the entire ben hashmoshes, then Rabbi Yosi would not argue. Even he would agree with Rabbi Meir that you have to be machmir and say that he is tamei, that it's not a valid eruv. Rabba v'Rav Yosef de Amrei Trovayu Hacha b'shteikite edim askinon. There are two different sets of witnesses that are contradictory to each other. One set of witnesses say that the Trum became Tomei mi ba'od yoim, whereas the other group of witnesses state that the Truma became Tomei only after Chashecha. So where you have a contradiction within the testimony. So, according to Rabbi Yosi, we will throw out the testimony because each one, trey v'trey, each one is then contradicting the other one. Whereby we're left with a chazaka. And the chazaka states that the truma was tahor beforehand, therefore you go after the truma. That is tahor. And that's why we're makil when it comes to the suffix. Whereas Rabbi Meir says that it's true we have two sets of witnesses that are contradictory, but one set of witnesses is stating that the trum became tamei mi ba'od yoim, whereby it's mafkia v'chazaka demikara. We can no longer rely on that chazaka, whereby we say sveika l'chumra. That's the sheet of Rabbi Meir. We're on top of Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. Rava Amar. Rava explains differently. Hasam trei chazake lekula v'hocha chada chazaka lekula. Rava states that there's a difference, that even in a scenario where you have two contradictory witnesses, testimony, that is even in the case where a person touched a person and was not clear when he touched him when he was dead or not. One set of witnesses says that when he touched him, he was already dead. Another set of witnesses that he touched him only when he was alive. He touched him while he was still alive. So here we have, again, two contradictory testimonies. And here, Rabbi Meir can then be maskim that you would go lekula. Why? Because over here, granted, we have one set of witnesses that are saying that he was dead when he touched him, whereby it should mafkia the chazaka that he was alive beforehand. But there's another chazaka, and that is that the person who touched him was tahor before he touched him. And therefore, even Rabbi Meir would say, when you have two Sveikis, two kulas, and therefore in each time two chazakas that are two kulas, we go basar the kula, and therefore in the case over here we'll say chazaka lekula, and in our case of truma, when you have two opposing contradictory witnesses testimony, there we'll say that we'll go misveike lechumra, because again, the testimony that says that it was tamei mi ba'od yom is mafkia the chazaka. So once again, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi can say that you go lechumra in the case of truma, because there's only one chazaka. But in the case over here, when he touches a person, not clear whether he's dead or not, here we have two chazakas, and therefore we can go lekula even according to Rabbi Meir.